Hey, what up, YouTube fam? This is Note to Fake J's, and today I want to do a quick tutorial on the sole swap process and step by step. I know in my last video I kind of just showed you the before and after picture, but I felt that it might be more informative to kind of show you the step by steps and on how to remove the sole so that I think just through experience this time around I made it much easier for myself, and so I'm going to show you sort of the shortcuts and the best method to remove these soles. So let's start with the Nike Zoom Vapor. So these are originally just for tennis shoes, but again, the reason why I wanted to use the soles because the thickness of the sole, when you're playing tennis, you do quite a bit of sliding, and I want to make sure there is thickness under for the sole for me to have good support. So if I'm sliding around on the tennis court, the bottom's going to wear out, but it's going to be pretty supportive. So the first thing again I did was I poured acetone in the shoe, and again, you have to remove the shoelace and remove the insole, and you can pour acetone in here. Now, once the acetones are set in there for about maybe 10 minutes, the side of the shoe will become very soft, which you can start pinching, and you can start pinching, and then the side will come apart. Once you have a little gap, once you start maybe starting to pull the sole, the upper part, I would recommend using a flathead screwdriver. That way you can work your way in there and just basically start, you can push it in and then turn it, and so that will help to separate any type of glue, a really strong glue bondage in there. And you just be patient, and you can eventually then start prying the side. These are, I guess, what are called the teeth marks. You can start using your fingers to pry these off, and they just come right off. Okay. And another tip for you is that I would start from the back. I would always start from the back and then move my way forward. But once you're gonna be moving the toe box area, I would recommend you taking an X-Acto knife and cutting the edges off here. Okay. This will actually serve two purposes. One is that if you do decide to use the upper in the future, you still have this part that is still intact, and it looks, it's ready to go. You can just basically kind of put the sole underneath, whatever sole you want to put on here. You can still use this. The other part is the reason why I think it's much easier is that when you start to cut off the rubber part here, then it will be much easier for you to separate the shoe here. Okay. Before my first pair, I actually did not cut it, and I just start to try to pull the toe cap from the sole, and basically it ripped a good chunk of this rubber part right here. It still worked, but it was much harder just because this part that's glued in is much more difficult to take out, versus if you just cut it, then you can just work your way, the bottom part here, to work your way to separate the sole. Okay, so I would advise you to cut it, so for that purpose, to easily remove the sole, and also to keep the upper in good condition, so in case if you want to use it in the future, you could do that too as well. My other pair, wasn't as good, but this is still fixable. You just sew this part and then sew this part together, and then you have your upper. Maybe just a little bit cleaning, maybe a little trimming of this, and probably clean this out a little bit more as well. And this could be, this could potentially be a good upper, in the future if I decide to use it. So that's why it's important for you to, if you do decide to use it, or if you decide to toss it out, you can just, cut it up and do whatever you want, and that's fine. But you have the option of using this in the future. Okay, so now let's go on to the next shoe, which is the the Vapormax. Now the Vapormax, again, because we are going to be using the upper, so we got to keep the upper in as pristine of a condition as possible. And as you can see, once you kind of know how to separate the sole, it's actually pretty easy. And you can see, it's pretty clean. There wasn't a lot of glue marks. Fabrics did not, stick on the bottom of the sole like here. How the fabric came off from the bottom of the sole and is still stuck onto the, in the insole here. So, and again, and you have to be aware as well that for this version of the Air Max 95, they actually have these flaps, and the flap is really just to cover. This is the sway part that covers the toe. So initially, when I didn't know about that, I was just really ripping, from the upper from the sole here, and some of these parts actually were ripped off, and then they stayed on the toe cap here on the sole, which made it more difficult for me to to kind of glue this down so that this part would be covered. If you don't have this and you just have just the edge here, it's going to be really hard for you to make sure that this toe cap part is covered. So when you're removing, just be mindful that you need to keep these flaps here so that you can glue them down later on, so that the upper part right here will be a nice clean line, okay, instead of having that ripple look. Okay, so it's all in the preparation, and once you know how to do it, it's actually very easy to do it. I mean, it probably took me a good 20 minutes to take out both sections, so total of 40 minutes just to take this off. So I mean, once you know how to do it, it's actually pretty easy. So again, how I started was that I started with the heel panel of the shoe. So basically I would take a flathead screwdriver again, okay, and then I would just kind of work my way. I would create a gap here, okay, and again, have a lot of patience. Don't rush this work, because if you want to separate these soles and to have a clean job, you got to have patience. So I would probably just start with trying to create a little gap here, a hole, and then once I have that, then I would just maybe take a little spoonful of acetone, and then I just kind of carefully pour it in there. When you pour the whole bottle, or the whatever you're using to go in there, sometimes they leak to the side and they will stain. So as you can see, I try to prevent that from happening. You can still see a little bit of stains there, but it's not that noticeable. Okay, but yeah, you basically want to take your time and to work your way through this gap here. So pour a little bit more acetone, and then stick the flathead screwdriver in there, and just kind of, again, you want to push it in and turn. So push it in, turn, push it in, turn, and that way you'll start hearing the separation of the sole from the bottom of the shoe. And then once you do that, you just add a little bit more acetone, a little here. A little bit actually goes a long way. You don't have to put a lot of acetone in there. Just kind of let it sit for maybe two minutes, and this part will start to soften up. Once that part softens up, then you can start use more of the screwdriver, flathead screwdriver in there. Go in there and turn. Go in there and turn. Go in there and turn. And then eventually you'll get to the point where you see most of the part is off, and then basically when you're working for the back, you just make sure that you don't want to rip too much of this part here. Okay, so you kind of just want to gently, once this on the last latch right here, then you want to just maybe take an X-Acto knife or something, just to kind of break up the threads that's still glued to the sole, and then eventually this will just come off. This part, the front part, is going to be a little bit more tricky. just because this part actually has more of you know, places that are glued down, whereas here this part actually has the plastic, sort of kind of, I mean, it's sort of in the purpose of, you know, making this flat, so it's actually easier for you to, when you're sticking your flathead screwdriver, there's a flat surface that you can do, then you can turn. Whereas here it's all fabric, and so if you push it in at a wrong angle, you could potentially puncture this fabric right here, which you have to be super careful. So this is, again, what I did was I created a hole. I just gently start to create a hole, and then again pour, you know, maybe a tablespoon of acetone, and just pour it in the hole. You know, again, with a lot of patience, push it in a little bit more, turn, push in a little bit more, and turn, push in more, and turn. The side part here is actually going to be quite difficult. This is where the majority of the gluing is going to be. As you can see, not only on the thread, but on the side is here as well. So you want to make sure that you, again, take your time, be patient, and just, again, slowly work your way through. Go in there and turn, go in there and turn, go in there and turn, so you can start hearing the separation. Once you get to this part, you have to be very careful. Again, you don't want to rip this fabric off. So you typically, what happens is that when you get to this point, this fabric will still be attached to the sole, and you just have to kind of work your way from this angle. Okay, you want to push it in, turn, push it in, turn, so that you save this flap. This is quite an important process to make sure you have a clean job, is that you want to keep this flap here so you can re-glue down later. And the same thing on the other side. And once you get to the top here, again, you know, I like to work from the bottom, middle to the front versus the front to the back. Once you get to here, again, this can be a little bit of attachment here. So again, you want to be very careful not to rip this off. But again, you know, take your screwdriver, go in there, and then push it in, turn. You know, push it in, turn, and then here, push it in, turn, push it in, turn. And then once you have that, then this thing comes off really easily. Okay, so you can see this is a pretty, you know, it's a lot of work, but, you know, I think that you know, this came out beautifully, so that I can use this to I mean, use the flaps to form the toe cap here. Okay, and that's pretty much it. And then, you know, the next step after this is, obviously I'm not going to be using these guys anymore, so I'm going to just leave it there. You know, maybe in the future, if I decide to maybe use these shoes to, you know, use them as here, something like that. I don't know. You know, we'll see what happens. But that's not my main project. But that's a potential for me to do that. So in the future, if I decide to do that, it's great. If not, then, you know, whatever. And then so the next step after this is you want to get a shaver or Dremel. And basically, you want to make sure you shave everything down evenly. So I can still see this is part of the fabric that was part of the shoe. This is really glued down. So I'm not gonna, you know, have to shave all this off. I just want to make sure I shave off these flaps here, so that it gives a nice clean surface. I'm gonna shave off, you know, the threads here as well. Maybe put a little bit filler here. There's a little bit of hole here that came off because of the glue. So I'll probably just fill it in a little bit, just make this part even. Shave the edges. Okay, remove all these excessive glue, factory glue. Shave the back here as well. Just make sure everything is even. Once that's done, then I will, you know, put a layer of glue in there, set it for, you know, a couple of hours, and then do the same thing again. And set it for a couple hours. Now for the upper, it's going to be much easier because, as you can see, most of the stuff is already flat. There's just very little glue, so I'm probably just going to use acetone and just get rid of these, you know, excessive, you know, glue residual marks here. Same thing here, but definitely I need to take shoe glue. Actually, shoe glue is probably the best. Is shoe glue, and just to glue these flaps down, so it makes a nice toe cap here. Okay, So once that's done, then I'm going to basically, put a layer of glue on here as well, set it for a couple of hours, and then repeat that process again, and then heat sink both the bottom and the upper, and then you glue them together. And I've actually made a mark here, so that tells me where I'm going to place my shoe. So as you can see, this is ideal place for me to set my shoe in. So this is kind of like, this will be the middle of the shoe. Okay, so this is my mark, and I'm gonna take either pencil or something and to draw the outline of where these teeth marks are gonna go, so that I know that the shoe will be placed in evenly. And the same thing, I'm gonna draw the outline here, so that when I glue down the shoe, then I know it's even and it's straight. Okay, and then basically, then you have to make sure the toe cap will come up, and then you glue that part together, and that's it. If you decide to paint this, which I'm planning to do as well, I would recommend you basically just do the process of acetoning the areas that you want to repaint. So I plan to paint this part, these two upper parts black. So the only thing that you'll see as white is just the bottom swoosh, but everything else will be black. So I think it'll turn out pretty nice. Okay, so I'll probably do another video once I completely shave this part off and ready for the gluing, just to let you see what it needs to look like for a good bonding of the glue to the bottom of the sole, a shoe. So you want to make sure that you shave all this off, preparing it and make sure everything's even. Then you put your glue on there. So in my next video, I'll probably do that. But I just wanted to kind of give you a tutorial, sort of the step-by-step on how to remove the sole, so that if you decide to do this, you have a better idea what to expect, and to expect to see what the bottom of the sole looks like, and what some of the areas you have to be very careful when you're actually doing this. So all right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. You learned something. Let me know if you have any questions. Please comment, subscribe, put that thumbs up if you found this video helpful. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Peace.